All right, welcome to technical session number 40, T-40. Remember, we jump around a lot. It's not a straight line through the T sessions. Today, we'll be going over, or kind of just getting an introduction to mobile operating systems. As you can look at your screen right now, take a wild guess. Which of these does not belong? Windows. Very good. So yeah, there is some Windows stuff in here. For the most part, we can ignore it. We'll lightly touch on it, but yeah, Windows operating system really isn't a thing. It wasn't even a thing then. I don't know why they put it in. I guess they wanted to have at least something for contrast. But we just work through it as we can. So our objective for this particular technical session is going to be to describe at a very high level the similarities and differences between mobile operating systems and other operating systems, and compare and contrast some of the most widely used OSs, including Android and iOS, and then some of their most common functions and features. Got to keep reminding ourselves of it. So some of the behavioral skills and mindsets we're going to want to try to keep in mind. First one, growth mindset. We are all capable of learning new things. We all can develop new skills. If we didn't think that, we wouldn't be here. And it is very true. If you put your mind to it and you're willing to work towards it, you can learn and develop new skills on the regular. And then also communication. That's a really big one. I think we have an entire T session on it. We tend to have 3 different languages. Actually, most people have more, but in the business world, we have 3. You have the language you use when you communicate with a customer. You have the language you're going to use when you communicate with a peer. And then you're also going to have a language you use when you communicate with a supervisor or manager. Bearing in mind that just because they're a supervisor or manager does not mean they know more than you about IT. Remember, managers manage resources. It's not necessarily because they have more knowledge about the IT field than you do. So communication is key. We need to, especially when dealing with our peers, if we're handing off trouble tickets to them at the end of our shifts, and we need to communicate, we need to be able to do that quickly, succinctly, and give them the key information they need without an entire dissertation. And with customers, try not to use overly technical language because that can be frustrating to them. All right, rise of mobile operating systems. So first we started out with the big brick phones, weighed about 8 pounds. Mobile was kind of a, loosely used term, but over time, the phones got smaller and smaller. We started developing functionality like texting, things like that. And our expectations and the things we would like to see in an operating system grew and evolved over time to the point where they started designing full-blown operating systems for them. So the operating systems are able to aid in the device's mobility and functionality, support a much smoother user experience, and to a degree provide some all-in-one capabilities. Like you can type up emails and stuff on a phone. It's not the best platform to do it, but technically you can do it. So for short, quick bursts of information, it works out pretty good. But again, for heavier lifting stuff, if you're going to need to type up a paper, if you're going to need to write a report, things like that, you're probably going to want to go with a full-blown desktop or laptop at that point. But for the most part, it provides a lot more all-in-one capabilities and a much smoother experience because we can synchronize a lot of information across platforms. How do they differ from their desktop or laptop counterparts? Well, for the most part, the main or primary input for mobile operating systems is the touchscreen. versus the laptop and computer, which the primary input is the keyboard and mouse. Again, some desktops do have touch screens, but even with that, the mouse is still more efficient because you have to keep reaching up here and pressing the screen in different points. And it's annoying, and it takes far more effort than flicking your wrist about 1/4 of an inch and clicking the mouse. Now, because we're limiting some of the functionality, or we need to limit a lot of the functionality because the processing power is not going to be as high as a desktop, and we're going to be operating off of much more limited power supply and primarily running off of a rechargeable battery. With this, we're going to have far more limited RAM efficiency, and we can't expand the RAM. There are no expansion ports for RAM on your phone, much to our dismay. Unlike most desktops and most laptops, mobile operating systems need to support both Wi-Fi and cellular. Now, some desktops or laptops may be able to support cellular, but that is the exception, not the rule. In the mobile operating system, it's pretty much the rule that it needs to be able to communicate over both of those. And then laptops predominantly communicate through connectivity protocols over Ethernet, where mobile operating systems need to use other protocols. So some of this may seem fairly obvious, but it's just one of those things we do have to notate along the way. Now, if you look at this, this is almost the complete inversion of the operating system market share that we looked at before. Windows takes up 0.001% at this point. I think at the point that this was taken, it was 0.07. So very, very, very small market share, whereas in the the desktop community, Windows is like 90%. It's probably less than that now, probably about 85 or so. So they're by far the huge player in the desktop, but in mobile, they just really couldn't get a foothold. Android, however, crushing it. Apple seems to do a little bit better in the mobile operating share than they do in the desktop, but they're still holding strong around that 25% here, and then probably about 10 to 15% in the desktop arena. So the most common ones you'll find, iOS and Android. Those are your two most common ones. That gets you like 99% of the way. Windows OS, we've talked about this. This has become legacy. It's almost non-existent except for the one or two fanboys that are out there still holding onto their Windows phone, refusing to give it up. And then there's some older OSs like BlackBerry, Symbian, WebOS, Bada, and Migo, which we had briefly mentioned in a previous technical session. So Apple, their version is the Apple iOS. That is the name for their mobile operating system. It's built on the same foundation as the desktop. So it's based off of what's called the Unix platform. So Unix is extremely stable, tried and tested platform. And I believe Windows 11 is going back to the Unix platform because that's what XP was built on, and that's why XP was so stable. So I think Windows has gone back to that. I can't confirm that, but I believe I'd heard them mention this. All right. iOS is called a closed source software, which means technicians and you and I do not have access to the source code. They keep that in-house, proprietary. They don't let anybody else have access to it. As compared to Android, which is a Linux-based system, and one of the requirements of Linux is if you develop off of their code, you must publish your source code. So it's an open source platform. So you and I could actually go in and look at the Android source code. So if you want to develop apps for Apple, you need to get from them what's called a software development kit and register as one of their developers. And then depending on the testing mechanisms they have in place, they will put your applications on the App Store. All right. So as we just briefly mentioned before, Android's built off of the Linux kernel, which has a core set of libraries that are written in JavaScript. Yes, Donald.
So if you don't have an SDK, you can't make an app for iOS?
I'm not saying you can't. It's going to be significantly easier if you do have it. I'm always leery of answering in absolutes. I would say for the most part, no.
Gotcha.
But Google operates off Linux kernel, which, as we just mentioned, is an open source operating system, and it is maintained by a group called the Open Handset Alliance. And I'm not sure if they're still doing this, but for a while there, all of their versions were named after some form of dessert. So you had Jelly Bean, Kit Kat, Lollipop, Marshmallow, Nougat. What version are they on now? Anybody know? We all Apple people in here?
Unfortunately, I switched last year.
Okay. What was the last one you remember?
Probably Marshmallow.
Marshmallow? Okay. So this is the naming, you know, like Apple did cats, then mountains, then parks. I think they're still on parks, if I remember. Windows, closed source, but nobody cares. So we'll move on. Other operating systems. This slide is almost identical to one we looked at a little bit earlier when we first started talking about laptops and stuff. So you had the BlackBerry, Symbian, HP, Bada, Amigo, and that's some of your older operating systems. And then there was Tizen, which tried to create a mobile operating system but was not successful. However, they now control almost a quarter of the smart TV market, which is pretty massive. So they were able to segue into something marketable for themselves, even though they were not able to gain a foothold in their original intended market. All right. Scratching out the windows in the middle. Basically, you have iOS, which is on your iPhones and iPads, and then everything else is Android. So to kind of keep it simple. So iOS, that's the Apple family. Everything else, pretty much Android. Did I show you all the Apple picture? See if I can find it real quick. It takes 2 seconds. Oh, here we go. Stop share. There you go.
That's rough.
I know, that's a real picture too.
That's rough.
They legit did this. So yeah, they legit did that. All right.
I think I don't know if I saw this picture on your lectures, Kelly, or on Coursera. They said the first iPhone, I think, is selling for like 35,000 now. I don't know if I saw it here or on Coursera.
I think that was on Coursera. I don't have a picture like that. Man, if that's the case, I gotta go find mine.
$35,000.
I think I have a 2. I don't know if that'll sell as much. Although my father-in-law, no joke, still has an Apple II and an original Mac, like the little box, all-in-one computers that they used to sell. So he still has one of those. All right. So we'll get into Apple versus Android. Here's some of the features that you'll see. We'll be talking about over the next few slides. Goes through pretty quickly. We're already basically halfway through. So open source versus closed source. We talked about this just a few slides ago. Android is open. They share their source code, allowing the developers community to continue to improve, develop, and move forward. Closed source software, that's going to be your Apple. It's also known as proprietary or vendor specific. The software is essentially licensed to us for use, but is kept within the control of the original publisher. So if you own an Apple, and even if, you know, even for a lot of things with regards to Android, you don't actually own the software and the stuff that's on the phone. You actually just own the actual phone itself. So for any reason, if they want, they literally can just shut down your operating system on your phone. And that's why they send you that terms of service every couple of weeks or so that you have to agree to. And if you violate any of those terms, which they change on a pretty regular basis, they can literally revoke your license of the software and you wouldn't have access to anything on your phone. Same thing with desktops. You don't actually own the software on it. It's a license. All right, applications. How do we get these fun little mini programs that add functionality and entertainment to our phones? Well, Google, you go to the Google Play Store. Apple, you go to the App Store, and it's still alive. The Windows Store operates on desktops and I believe some of their tablets too. So Windows Store, App Store, and Google Play. Built in within these phones, they added some kind of neat features. They have a gyroscope, which lets the phone know the position that the phone's in at any given time. That's why, like, if you have your phone vertical, it has your screen one way. If you pan it sideways, it's able to change the orientation of the screen for you so that it's a little more functional for you. It gives you that, you know, mini theater experience or whatnot. And that is determined by the gyroscope within the phone. The phone also has something in it called an accelerometer, which measures the change in velocity or speed and direction, which kind of, you know, if you've ever had any applications, they can tell you what your speed is in your car. If you have your speedometer brake, you can actually download an app and it'll tell you your land speed based off of the accelerometer and your GPS location. So that's a kind of neat functionality as well. And they combine these things together so you can use them for games and other applications as well. All right, revisiting our screens. Remember, there are 2 types of touch screens, capacitive and resistive. Resistive works off of pressure. Capacitive operates off of a lighter touch, but it is more about electrical connectivity. Almost all phones nowadays are capacitive. If you have a calibration error, which is exceedingly rare on a capacitive touch, you basically just need to restart it, and that does pretty good as far as recalibrating it automatically, although they may have a built-in tool if the initial calibrations aren't working. So resistive touch needed frequent calibrations because they would fall out of sync pretty quickly. It's because they want you to update your phone, Enrique. They want you to come in and Turn it in for a newer version. Planned obsolescence. All right. Geolocation. Kind of gives a relative or absolute positioning of a device from the viewpoint of the planet and space. This is GPS, which how many satellites do we need to get a GPS signal, like an accurate location? Excellent. 3. If I have a 4th satellite, Adria, what do I get?
If it's just pinpointing where you are with 3, I guess the direction is where you get with the 4th.
The 4th, you actually get altitude.
Altitude.
Yes. So if you're ground positioning off 3, but you can get altitude, like if you're on the 10th floor of a building.
That's kind of scary.
So 4th satellite gives you altitude, 3 gives you general position. And then in the phone, along with that gyroscope and accelerometer, they also have a magnetometer, which is a compass. That's all it is. It's a fancy name for a compass. It tells you which direction you're pointing in. Now, in the cities, as we talked about before, it's hard to get line of sight on 3 GPS satellites. So it uses assisted GPS, which also pings off of cell towers to give a relative position as well. Where are the calculations being made with the GPS system to tell me where I am?
Is it a server?
Is it?
I don't know.
Do a vote for a server. So you think you send your data to the satellites, and then it goes to some, government agency where they run the calculations and they send it back, says you are here?
Yeah, pretty much.
So what did we say that GPS satellites did?
They triangulate, so this is satellites themselves. No?
So do the satellites themselves make the calculations? I mean, is that what the satellites are there to do?
The satellites are there to tell you where you are relative to their calculations. So I'm guessing, yeah, isn't it the satellite's job?
Interesting. Yeah, that's one theory. What's going on with regards to the satellites is the satellites themselves don't make any calculations. They're actually very, very simple devices with regards to satellites. All they do is send out a ping. Each satellite has a unique ping. And based on which satellites you're picking up and the timing between the pings, your phone makes the calculation as to where you are. So the receiver for the GPS is where all the calculations are made. The satellites, all they do is just send out pings. That's it. It's just like a little beacon telling you where you are. And GPS isn't the only one. Actually, there are several different versions out there of the GPS. Europe has their own version. China has their own version. Africa, I believe, has their own version. And there's a couple more out there as well that they put the satellites up there and they use different calculations and pings for their own purposes. All right, geo-tracking versus geo-tagging. So both your Androids and your Apples record much of your locations, where you go on a daily basis, where you are right now, periodically send that information back to whoever you allow to track you. Be it your Candy Crush app, I don't know why they would need to track you, but they often ask. If you have any retail apps like Amazon or Home Depot, Sears, JC, whatever, they may track you as well because they want to know if you're near one of their stores, or they want to know if you're, going to one of their competitors so they can better advertise to you to see if they can encourage you away. So that's geo tracking. Then you have geo tagging, where you can use information to add to location information or drop a pin to remember a specific location. This is like one of the best things that I ever heard somebody say is whenever you park your car, if it's in a really large parking lot, you can go in your phone and drop a geotag pin right there. That way, when you go into the store or whatever, when you come out, you can look on your phone and it'll tell you right where your car is. Or if you live in New York where it used to be. It's a thought. Just kidding. But there's just a helpful tool if you go to a place like with a really large parking lot, airports, things like that. Drop a pin, right where your car is located. Wi-Fi calling. We don't all want to use our cell minutes. Some plans don't offer a lot. However, we can utilize Wi-Fi calling, which is based off of the voice over IP. It's similar to it. It allows you to use whatever Wi-Fi networks you're attached to call out on your phone. Saves you on your minutes, saves you on your data, all that fun stuff like that. It operates off of what's called the IEEE 802.11 connection. Don't worry, we will get much more familiar with that next week. And when it's working properly, which depending on your cell service could be often or never, you wouldn't even notice if you switched over, because some of them will be able to switch over automatically. Some of them, unfortunately, drop the call when you switch between cellular and wireless. So, but it is a nice feature to save on data and minutes as well. Now, operating systems on the phones tend to be GUI, which is graphical user interface. So when you go in there, you're not operating off of a text command line, you're operating off of pictures and icons, and you would select your items as you need it. You can personalize a lot of these. Android has a lot more personalization capabilities than Apple does. Apple tends to keep a much tighter control on it, unless you do something which is called jailbreaking your Apple device. And unfortunately, if you do that, you void any and all warranty on that phone at that point. But Android offers a ton of other options. One of those like viewing the weather forecast on your homepage. So you always have that readily available for you if you wish. Virtual assistants, these wonderful things that have absolutely invaded our lives. They're constantly listening and spying on us. If you don't believe me, hey Google, please set an alarm for 3 a.m. Alexa, can you please play polka music? Hey Siri, please set an alarm for midnight. If any of you are not having your headphones on and listening, you probably got one of those set up for you. I had a student last semester that always had his on, and if ever he walked away, we would try to set alarms for entertaining things on his Google device. All right, so Apple uses Siri. Android uses Google Now or Hey Google. And Windows uses Cortana. I don't know if that's still a thing. Does Windows 11 still have Cortana? Anybody out there?
Yeah,
Yeah, it still has
I
it.
don't have it, but it's off.
They
Okay.
hit it somewhere.
They hit it somewhere. I never
Yeah.
turned mine on. So, but yeah, I didn't know if 11 still had it. Is that Bixby? All right. Developer kits. So Apple and Android, you have software development kits. I believe that's Apple. And then you have ADK, which is application development kits. And that is Android. Windows, nobody cares. On Android, there's a couple different ones you can use. You can do it in Linux. You could do it in Android Studios. There's a couple other third-party applications that you can use. And then the APK, which is the Android application package. So you have the application development kit and the Android application package. I always got those confused. So, and this is if you wish to develop your own apps to run on these. And unfortunately, they don't play well with each other. So yes, they would have to be coded differently to work on Apple than they would on a Android. That's why you'll see a lot of developers, especially if they're first getting started, they will put their application up on one or the other, and then a few months later, they may put it up on the secondary one. Questions so far?
No questions, but for anybody that thinks that Android cameras are worse than Apple cameras, this is the exact reason. The same app is coded differently to work with different operating systems on an Android phone.
Correct.
Because Android has multiple versions and multiple different features that they can have, while iOS is one operating system that stays the same until it's updated over all of the phones.
Yes.
So they don't need to worry about it.
On Apple, you have essentially cleaner edges, cleaner lines, because it's very streamlined and tightly controlled. Android, you have far more variability. So you have a lot more variety with your applications and capabilities than you would with an Apple, but stuff that is on Apple is far more cleaned up. Babukar.
Basically, is there by any chance like the A+ exams, like they can bring questions like Nokia operating systems or Samsung operating systems, like Google, like different kinds?
I have not heard of them doing that. That's not to say that they won't. The you know, we have the objectives for the 1100, but as far as some of the, like all the trick questions that they may kind of put in there, or subjects that they may drop on you that was surprising, a lot of that really hasn't come out yet. So typically I hear from students and stuff like that who've run through it. They were like, okay, well, I saw this and this was kind of weird, and I'll know to bring that up, because usually they have about a 400 to 500 question pool that they pull from, but almost everybody has the same performance-based questions.
Okay, because I read about the mobile operating systems, like Nokia, they use, I think, the Symbian, Symbian.
Yep, that was back here.
Samsung used like the BADA, BADA, something like that.
Yeah, that was back here. All the way back here, right here.
The Symbian, okay, there you go. Okay.
So Symbian, BADA, Amigo, ties in,
okay.
BlackBerry.
Yeah, Symbian is used by Nokia.
Mm-hmm.
And BADA by Samsung. Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem. All right, emergency notifications. I know I'm not the only one that has woken up in the middle of the night to one of these, or you get that blaring alert on your phone. More often than not in Florida, it's the extreme weather warnings. So it's the severe thunderstorms and stuff like that is what we usually get. But they also have local emergencies, stuff like that, flash floods, all that kind of fun stuff. They also have amber and silver alerts, ambers for children, silvers for elderlies that get lost. And then in the last 5-6 years or so, they've now added presidential alerts for national emergency type stuff. But yeah, they kind of cut through. Even if your phone's on silent, those suckers will go off. and be loud. All right, mobile payment service. We finally caught up on this because I believe Europe had this going on in Japan back in like the late 90s. They had this down. But we're starting to catch up and roll these out where you can set up wireless mobile payment systems. One that's pretty popular is Square. But they've also added in Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, where you can attach individual cards to it. And then they have other ones like Venmo and stuff like that, where you can literally direct send people cash if you wish directly from your bank accounts. Anybody use these? Like Cash App, Venmo, stuff like that? Crypto? No. Anybody?
Not crypto.
No crypto for me also.
I appreciate that. And then you did. All right. You're fine. All right. So, any questions so far on this one?
Is there any difference, like, in terms of what we're learning this for? This is mainly for being able to just compare?
Yeah, this was a very, very high level compare and contrast. And they may ask you things like, what is the purpose of an accelerometer in a phone? Or a magnetometer or something like that. So it's just kind of getting you exposed to some of the terminology used in mobile devices, because some of y'all might want to operate in the mobile space rather than in the, application or desk space.
Okay.
Remember, A+ is to lay a foundation across the entire field. And then from there, you can kind of see what sparks your interest and build yourself up from there.
I want to be with Ericsson.
I could see that. I don't know.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, kind of brings us to the end of our technical session. Pretty brief one for this afternoon. Any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, revelations? Thought I'd start you guys out a little light this week.
I feel completely lost at networking. I can't wait to go over that together.
Introduction to networking is on Friday. That is usually a pretty hefty session.
I love networking, bro.
Do we need to memorize this Windows phone stuff?
Me too, man.
Networking
Like, is that going to be on the test?
Extremely.
The Windows stuff?